The echo in the walls. This house was supposed to be our fresh start. A charming, albeit ancient, Victorian in a quiet, tree-lined street, its gables reaching like skeletal fingers towards the sky, its stained glass windows shimmering like forgotten jewels. My wife, Eleanor, loved its character, the ornate woodwork, the intricate patterns of light cast across the dusty floors by the morning sun. I loved the silence. After years in the bustling, cacophonous city, the profound, almost oppressive quiet was a balm to my frazzled nerves, a promise of peace. It had a strange history, of course. Locals whispered about the previous owner, a reclusive artist named Elias Thorne, who had supposedly vanished without a trace decades ago, leaving behind only his unfinished, unsettling works and a pervasive sense of unease that clung to the very air of the place. But every old house has its quirks, right? Every history, its forgotten chapters. The first few weeks were wonderful. We unpacked, painted the peeling walls in cheerful colors, made it our own, filling the empty spaces with our laughter and hopes. But as the boxes dwindled and the echoes of our own voices faded, other sounds began to emerge from the silence. Faint at first, almost imperceptible. A rhythmic scratch, scratch, coming from within the walls, usually late at night, after Eleanor had fallen into a deep, exhausted sleep. It wasn't the hurried scurry of mice. This was too deliberate, too slow, too methodical. Like fingernails dragging across rough plaster, or something being etched into the very bones of the house. A desperate message being carved from within. I'd press my ear against the wall, holding my breath, but the sound would always cease the moment I got close, only to resume once I pulled away. A mocking, phantom rhythm. Eleanor, when I mentioned it, would dismiss it with a weary smile, saying it was the house settling, or perhaps old pipes expanding and contracting. She was always more pragmatic than I, less inclined to entertain the supernatural. Then came the whispers. Not distinct words, not at first. Just a low, murmuring sound, a confluence of faint, disembodied voices, like a distant radio playing through a thick wall, impossible to make out, yet undeniably there. A constant, unsettling hum beneath the silence. They seemed to emanate from the eldest part of the house, the unused study, filled with forgotten canvases, a heavy antique easel, and the faint, lingering scent of linseed oil, turpentine, and something else. Something metallic and cold, like stale iron. I'd stand in the doorway, listening, a prickling sensation on my neck, convinced I was hearing conversations, arguments, pleas, all muffled and distorted by the plaster and brick, a chorus of unseen torment. But whenever I stepped inside, the murmuring would fade into an oppressive silence, leaving only the heavy, expectant quiet. Eleanor began to change, subtly at first, then with alarming speed. She'd spend hours in the study, just sitting, staring at the blank canvases the previous owner had left behind, her gaze distant and unfocused. She said she felt inspired, that the house was speaking to her, guiding her hand, filling her with a dark, creative energy. She started painting again, with an intensity I hadn't seen in years, but not her usual vibrant landscapes or joyful portraits. These were dark, abstract pieces, filled with swirling shadows and distorted, anguished figures. their faces contorted in silent screams, their limbs reaching out from unseen depths. The colors were muted, grimy, reminiscent of dried blood, decay, and the cold gray of forgotten stone. Her hands, usually so steady and precise, began to tremble uncontrollably. Her eyes, once bright and lively, took on a haunted, faraway look, shadowed by exhaustion and a growing, unnameable terror. She complained of dreams. Vivid, terrifying dreams of being trapped within the walls of the house, of endless, narrow passages that stretched into suffocating darkness, and the agonizing, claustrophobic press of ancient timbers, slowly crushing her. Dreams of faces appearing in the plaster, silent, screaming faces, their mouths opening and closing without a sound, their eyes wide with a desperate, unspoken terror that mirrored the figures in her paintings. She'd wake up gasping, drenched in a cold sweat, her heart hammering against her ribs, her screams caught in her throat. One particularly cold evening, as a furious storm raged outside, rattling the old windows and howling through the eaves, Eleanor was in the study, painting with a frenzied desperation. I heard a loud, violent crack from within the walls, followed by a sickening thump that shook the very foundations of the house. I rushed in, my heart pounding. Eleanor was on the floor, collapsed, her body a crumpled heap, her brush still clutched in her trembling hand. On the wall beside her, a fresh crack, jagged and ugly, snaked its way across the old plaster, almost perfectly mirroring the one on her newest, most disturbing painting. A self-portrait of a woman trapped within a crumbling wall, her face contorted in a silent scream. And from that crack, a faint, metallic odor began to emanate, familiar and terrifying, a coppery tang that spoke of old, congealed blood and stale iron. I helped her up, her body trembling uncontrollably, her skin clammy and cold. She pointed a shaking finger at the crack, her eyes wide with a horrifying clarity. "He's here," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a fragile thread against the storm's roar. "He's always been here, trapped. He wants to be heard. He wants out." That night, the scratching intensified, becoming a frantic, desperate crescendo. It was no longer confined to the walls of the study. It was everywhere. From the bedroom walls, the ceiling above our bed, even the floorboards beneath our feet. A cacophony of frantic, desperate scratching, as if countless unseen hands were trying to claw their way out of a tomb. 1,000 buried souls fighting for release. The whispers grew louder, clearer now, intertwining into a chilling chorus of agony and despair. I could make out fragmented words, phrases, distinct and horrifying. "Help me. Trapped. Don't forget. He's watching. You're next." I stumbled out of bed, my mind reeling, grabbing the strongest flashlight I could find, determined to find the source, to confront this unseen terror. Eleanor, however, stayed perfectly still, her eyes wide, staring at the wall beside her, a strange, knowing, almost serene smile beginning to form on her lips. She was no longer afraid. She was listening. She was waiting. I found myself in the study again, drawn by an irresistible, chilling pull, as if the house itself were guiding me. The whispers here were deafening, a ghostly gale of tormented voices swirling around me, pressing in from all sides. The air was thick, heavy, suffocating, permeated with that cloying metallic scent that now seemed to cling to my clothes, my skin. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, dancing across the canvases, which now seemed to writhe with unspoken terror. The painted figures seeming to shift and moan in the flickering light. I ran my hand along the old wall, the one with the crack, feeling a faint vibration, a ghostly heartbeat within the plaster, a pulse of ancient suffering. Suddenly, the plaster began to crack further, not from impact, but from within, like a bone breaking under immense internal pressure. A slow, agonizing rupture. More cracks appeared, spider-webbing outwards with sickening speed, until a section of the wall began to crumble, dust and debris raining down, revealing a dark, hollow cavity within. And there, revealed by the stark beam of my flashlight, was a skeletal hand, its bony fingers outstretched, frozen in a desperate, clawing gesture, coated in a thick, dried, reddish-brown substance. Attached to the wrist, still clutched in its decaying grasp, was a small, rusted chisel, its tip worn from endless, futile scraping. The same kind of tool the previous owner, Elias Thorne, the artist, would have used. And all around it, etched deeply into the interior brickwork of the wall, were countless lines, scratches, marks, a desperate tally, a horrifying record of endless, agonizing confinement. The words were there too, gouged into the brick with the chisel, over and over, repeating into infinity, a testament to a mind broken by despair. I am here. 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 A cold, unseen force seemed to press against my chest, stealing my breath, crushing the air from my lungs. And then, from the cavity, from the very depths of the wall, a single, raspy whisper, clearer than any I'd heard before, chilling me to the bone, echoing the words I'd heard earlier. You're next. I didn't scream. I couldn't. My voice was trapped, my limbs paralyzed by a terror so profound it transcended physical sensation. I just stood there, frozen, the skeletal hand reaching, the whispers enveloping me, the crushing weight of the trapped entity bearing down upon my soul. The last thing I saw, before the darkness took me, before the house claimed me, was the faint, knowing smile on Eleanor's face as she watched me from the doorway, her eyes reflecting the horrors within the wall, not with fear, but with a chilling, detached fascination, as if she were merely observing an inevitable progression, a cycle she had now joined. The house is quiet now. Sometimes, when a new family moves in, drawn by its deceptive charm, I hear the scratching, the faint whispers, the desperate pleas. And then the new canvases begin to appear, full of the same dark, abstract figures, the same screaming faces, their eyes wide with terror. And I know the echo in the walls has found new ears to listen, new hands to create, and a new soul to trap. And the cycle continues, endlessly, within these ancient, hungry walls.